This week marks the 70th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. We have a tribute. Then we'll examine the big stories of the week. The prisoner swap with the Taliban, Pope Francis's shakeup of the Vatican's financial watchdog agency, and more. Robert Royal of the Faith and Reason Institute and Father Gerald Murray of the Archdiocese of New York are here. And later, chef and author Father Leo PATALINGHUG will discuss the importance of family meals and the new gift he's created for parishes. And finally, Mark Burnett and Roma Downey on the DVD release of their hit film, Son of God. The World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Robert Royal, Father Gerald Murray, Father Leo PATALINGHUG, Mark Burnett, and Roma Downey are straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send us a tweet at Raymond Arroyo. I'll be live tweeting throughout the show. Or drop us an email at worldover@EWTN.com. Let's get started. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. The fallout over the Bo Bergdahl prisoner exchange continues here in the U.S. Both sides of Capitol Hill are calling the president to account for his decision to exchange 5 top-level al-Qaeda militants held at Guantanamo Bay for the release of an Army private in Taliban custody. A rare closed-door meeting with all 100 senators and White House officials did little to quell criticism from both Democrats and Republicans. Senators object to the president's lack of congressional consultation prior to the swap. They are also raising questions about whether releasing the al-Qaeda militants would endanger the lives of Americans. House Speaker John Boehner on Tuesday accused the president of intentionally keeping the swap under wraps, hoping to avoid congressional opposition. The president in Brussels on Thursday stood by his decision.
We have a basic principle. We do not leave anybody wearing the American uniform behind. We had a prisoner of war whose health had deteriorated, and we were deeply concerned about, and we saw an opportunity and we seized it, and I make no apologies for that.
Staying in Brussels, the President and British Prime Minister David Cameron laid down new markers for Russia with regard to Ukraine. Following the Group of 7 World Leaders Summit, rearranged to exclude Russian President Vladimir Putin, Obama and Cameron announced that Moscow has a month to meet 3 new conditions or face further economic sanctions. The Prime Minister said that Putin must 1. Acknowledge Ukraine's newly elected president, 2. Russia must stop arms from crossing the border, and 3. It must cease support of pro-Russian separatist groups in eastern Ukraine. Cameron said Putin's actions are completely unacceptable and at odds with the group's democratic values. Back in the United States, Congress is continuing to push for reform in the wake of the Veterans Administration healthcare scandal. Senior senators have reached agreement on a bipartisan bill that would expand veterans' ability to get government-paid medical care outside of Veteran Affairs hospitals and clinics. The framework agreement was announced Thursday on the Senate floor. It would allow veterans who experience long waits for VA appointments or who live at least 40 miles away from a VA facility to use enrolled private doctors as providers for Medicare or other government programs. The VA's sprawling healthcare system provides care to about 6.5 million veterans annually. And Tuesday marked the 25th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. The 2-day crackdown by China's military killed hundreds, possibly thousands, of unarmed democracy activists and onlookers. On Wednesday, 100,000 or more people in Hong Kong and Taiwan lit candles and attended vigils to remember the victims and the cause for freedom in the communist nation. Beijing has never given a full account of what happened during the crackdown or its human toll. China's Tiananmen Square daily flag-raising ceremony on the anniversary of the massacre was carried out without incident, albeit under heavy security. And a new Boko Haram massacre in northeastern Nigeria has left at least 200 dead. On Monday, the jihadist group attacked 4 villages, burning down hundreds of homes and at least 1 church and mosque. According to witnesses, militants disguised as Nigerian soldiers rounded up civilians, claiming they were there to protect them from a Boko Haram attack, and once gathered, they turned their guns on the villagers, shouting Allahu Akbar, killing all the civilians. Nigeria's government is again being faulted for not protecting its citizens. Local officials said they'd informed the government of an imminent attack. Nigeria's military never showed. Boko Haram is believed responsible for more than 2,000 deaths so far this year alone. Turkey's world-famous Hagia Sophia has again become the object of Muslim conquest. This past weekend, tens of thousands protested outside the Istanbul monument to demand and pray that the museum be reconverted into a mosque. Completed in 537, Hagia Sophia was for 900 years the basilica of the Patriarch of Constantinople. When the Byzantine Empire was conquered by the Ottoman Turks in the 15th century, it was gutted and converted into a mosque. It remained a mosque until Turkey's modern founder, Mustafa Ataturk, declared it a museum in 1934. Activists have collected 15 million signatures, calling upon the government to turn the museum into a mosque once again. One activist told Reuters that the Hagia Sophia is a symbol for the Islamic world and the symbol of Istanbul's conquest. Without it, he said, the conquest is incomplete. In New Orleans, the school district has closed its 5 remaining traditional public schools, making it the first all-charter school system in America. Responding to poor performance, Louisiana's Recovery School District assumed control of the state's worst-performing schools in 2003. They later took more control of those schools in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. Since that time, students in the New Orleans charter system have steadily improved their math and reading scores. The high school graduation rate is now approaching 80%, up considerably from the pre-Katrina rate of 54%. Despite the improvements, critics say the now all-charter system maintains overtly strict disciplinary procedures and an enrollment that favors white students over African Americans in better performing schools. Advocates say the charter system empowers parents and has demonstrated its worth. And in Rome, Pope Francis continued his discourse on the devil this week. Speaking to some 50,000 Catholics at the Charismatic Renewal on Sunday, he warned that Satan is ever trying to destroy the family. The Holy Father said that since families are the domestic church, quote, the enemy will often attack it to prevent love from becoming free. He encouraged families to be strong in the face of this current crisis, and he said the devil wants to destroy the family. And the Pope's call for bishops and priests to be authentic pastors and not careerists seems to have struck a nerve in the United States. Speaking at a convention of American theology professors, Indianapolis Archbishop Joseph Tobin said he's seen how disruptive Pope Francis has been within the U.S. hierarchy. He reported that bishops and priests are very discouraged by Pope Francis because he was challenging them and their idea of what it means to be a pastoral leader in the country. Pope Francis, he said, is disturbing the hierarchy due to what he calls some resistance to a different way of doing the gospel mission of the church. In a side note, Chicago Sun-Times columnist Michael Sneed speculated this week that Archbishop Tobin could be Pope Francis's pick to replace the soon-to-be retiring Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago, Francis George. Sneed cited a Vatican observer who called Tobin a hot prospect to fill the post. The Archbishop once served as a pastor in Chicago and also held a top Vatican position before his appointment to Indianapolis in 2012. And this week marks the 70th anniversary of the Allied invasion of Normandy, France. D-Day was a critical turning point in the war, and a daring operation. As a tribute to all those who took part in the invasion, here are some reflections by the veterans who were there.
I've thought many times the D in D-Day meant Death Day.
I don't care how tough you are, it gets you.
Every D-Day, specifically on that day, I don't forget who was there and what we were doing.
The odds of surviving were so slim. And to survive was something unbelievable.
Of course, we're all nervous, and we could see down, look down, we could see the silhouettes of the ships. And what I said in there, of course, was that when I saw all those ships, I said, well, if you have any doubt about it now, you look down there, this is going to happen one way or the other.
Every man that came through that machine gun fire and landed on Omaha Beach, every man was a hero. If they talk about heroes, these guys knew when they walked into that machine gun fire what it was.
And you could actually see the channels of machine gun fires in the beach. And you had to be lucky to be between those channels of fire.
We were about 400 yards off the beach when an 88 artillery shell hit my boat. It was blown up in the air. All I remember is the boat going up and over. I cracked my skull against the bulkhead. Next thing I remember, I'm laying underneath this rock wall on the left flank of Omaha Beach. Two men, I was told, dragged me ashore.
Weight we had on our back, we'd take one step and slide back half a step, take another step and slide back.
Bodies all over the front edge of the water. They're just laying there, bobbing. It's amazing how you can be so immune to feelings. You know, you just look and it goes with the program, you know.
My fellow Americans, last night when I spoke with you about the fall of Rome, I knew at that moment that troops of the United States and our allies were crossing the channel in another and greater operation. It has come to pass with success thus far.
When I go to cemeteries, as often as I've gone there, it gets me. It still gets me. I can feel it right now.
When Company C that waited ashore on Omaha Beach. And today, by my count, there's only 4 of us left.
It had to happen, or had to be successful, otherwise we'd be somewhere else today, maybe saluting Hitler, I don't know. I hope not Mussolini anyway.
All those years now, 70 years, hasn't erased any of the feelings that we had for our soldiers there, our buddies that we'd been with, and to see them die there will never leave your mind.
What amazing men. When we return, Robert Royal and Father GERALD MURRAY of our new review crew will be here to offer their thoughts on the hot stories of the week when the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. We launch a new segment tonight, the Review Crew. Once a month, we'll convene a panel of thinkers, writers, and activists to analyze the stories that matter most to you. To get us started, I'm joined by the editor-in-chief of thecatholicthing.org, Robert Royal, and from the Archdiocese of New York, Father Jerry Murray. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
Good to be with you, Raymond.
Now, I want to start with this. The bishops are meeting next week, their spring meeting, and one of the things they'll be tackling is a rewrite of this faithful citizenship document. You'll remember this from years gone by. In the past, all they've done is rewrite an intro to it. There's a drive now to recraft the whole thing. Why?
Well, as you know, Raymond, one of the difficulties with that original document was it was very good in the first pages on life issues, all the moral issues that are the most difficult things to talk about. But then it seemed to backpedal in the later stages, saying, but you know, Catholics are not single-issue voters. We're not focused on one thing. And then the other issues, which are legitimate issues on poverty and inclusiveness and discrimination and immigration, those things were all brought in, and it appeared as if they were on an equal plane. So my guess, and it can only be a guess at this point, my guess is that there's going to be some sort of attempt to make sure that it's very clear, as Rome has said for many, many years, that there are certain moral issues which are absolutely non-negotiable. You don't attack innocent human life. And others which partake of a more prudential character. How you deal with the poor, how you deal with immigration issues, these are issues that allow multiple approaches.
Father Murray, there was a lot of moral equivalence, if you will, between things like poverty and racism and abortion and traditional marriage. All these issues were kind of on the same moral plane in that earlier document. Now, it's very interesting because some, the National Catholic Reporter among others, are complaining because the bishop's staff has been sort of taken out of the business of this rewrite. It's been entrusted to the vice president, Cardinal DiNardo, of the entire conference. Your thoughts on that development?
I think that's a good development. We need to have the bishops themselves teaching when they act as a corporate group, teaching in their own name and not simply stamping a committee product from their experts. You know, I'm reminded in the recent, let's say, last 30 to 40 years, the bishop who got the most attention on the pro-life issue was Cardinal O'Connor. And he was a strong rejecter of the so-called seamless garment argument. On the other hand, he was a great defender of helping the poor, justice for union members, taking care of the sick. There's no contradiction when you highlight the horror of killing children that you're not going to take care of the other problems that face society.
Yeah, this is one thing, and people often try to divorce. This is the Catholic thing, Robert Royal.
I'm glad you
see, I'm working in the product placement. It's very good and nice of me. Let's talk about this synod in October coming up. This has been getting a lot of ink. Some saying this is going to represent a major change. We're going to see a moment of turning vis-a-vis Catholics who are divorced and remarried, and they will be admitted back into the sacraments. Your thoughts on this? The Pope says no. This is going to be a broad discussion of family issues in the context of evangelization. What does that mean?
Well, he had to make this rather strong statement because what began to happen, and he mentioned it, what began to happen is in the secular media, and he said, unfortunately, even within the church itself, some people were beginning to think that this synod on the family was solely going to be occupied with these neuralgic issues like divorced and remarried Catholics who want to receive communion, etc. So I think in one way that was a recognition that the message was starting to be distorted, and he emphasized that there are so many different things that challenge the family, economically, morally, you know, on and on and on. But it's not. It's a sign, and I think lots of people are nervous because once you start a large-scale activity like this, naturally certain expectations get started. The media tends to want to emphasize the things that look new, that they're newsy, they're more liberal, they're less traditionally Catholic. So there's that great danger of distortion.
Father Gerald Murray, you wrote a piece called Cardinal Casper Continued, which Robert here published a few weeks ago. In it, you quote Cardinal Casper, and this was an interview he gave to Commonweal. Here's what he said, and I'd like you to react. He says, what happens to the first marriage? And he says, the first marriage is indissoluble because marriage is not only a promise between the two partners, it's God's promise too. Therefore, the bond of marriage remains. Of course, Christians who leave their first marriage have failed. That's clear. The problem is when there is no way out of such a situation. How do you respond to that?
Well, Cardinal Casper's book is seriously flawed. This is that speech he gave to the assembled cardinals back in February, and he came on a book tour in the U.S., and he gave that interview. The failure of a marriage is a very difficult way for a pastor to talk about the difficulties that are attendant upon a civil divorce or just a separation. The issue here is God created marriage as a permanent union of man and woman. And to take up with another partner is adultery. Everybody knows that. The Church teaches it. And the Cardinal wants to have a new situation in which if you're separated from your spouse, you can get away with scot-free adultery and the church will give you communion. It's as simple as that. It's just not right.
Now, I've interviewed a number of cardinals since this February statement was made by Cardinal Kasper. Some are saying, look, we've got to do something to reform this tribunal process. Would you be opposed to that? You're a canon lawyer.
Right, I'm a canon lawyer. We should remember the Code of Canon Law was revised and reissued in a new form in 1983 by Pope John Paul II. And they did a lot of reform to the trial procedures because the finding of a decree of nullity is attendant upon a trial. Evidence has to be gathered, witnesses heard. I would be very hesitant to get rid of that. You know, the sacrality of marriage demands solemnity. You know, we have all kinds of preparation for marriage, a solemn ceremony in church. We shouldn't just have an administrative stamp be given that says, well, my marriage didn't work, I'd like to get out of it. Here's my paper, could you stamp it? That's trivializing the whole thing. Marriage is a sacrament. We have to protect the sanctity of the sacrament.
I want to read something else that Cardinal Kasper is quoted as saying. He said, the second marriage, of course, is not a marriage in our Christian sense, but there are elements of a marriage. And he goes on to say, it's not the best situation, it's the best possible situation. You would say what?
Not the best possible situation at all. The best possible situation when people are separated is to reunite, and if they can't reunite for various reasons, then they remain faithful to their vows. That's heroic Christianity. How many people are out there whose marriages unfortunately didn't work out? They've been faithful to their vows, they love the Lord, and they believe when the Lord said, what God has joined, man must not separate, that they don't have an exemption from that. I get very, very upset when I hear church figures treating the words of the Lord as something optional. And I'm afraid that's what's happened with Cardinal Kasper's speech.
Robert Royal, where do you see this going? You're in these circles. You talk to both writers, thinkers, as well as church leaders. What are you hearing out there?
Well, there's a lot of puzzlement, and there's a lot of nervousness.
And
frankly.
Camps forming.
Yes, and there are camps forming, and people not talking to one another, and feeling that they've been excluded from conversations that are very crucial to this. But I'd like to emphasize a point that Father just mentioned, and that is one of the things I've been hearing from people who are in some of these difficult circumstances is, my husband left me. I've been faithful to the church. I haven't gone off and married somebody else. And, you know, why is there going to be a pass given to this circumstance? So when Father says that there has to be a sort of a legal procedure, nobody likes going to court. No one likes having to deal with lawyers. Excuse me, Father Murray. But there doesn't seem to be any other way to safeguard the due process.
The rights of all individuals.
The rights of all the individuals. So as some have suggested, and I think maybe even Cardinal Kasper did, that this could be handled by a pastor in a parish, or you would go in and talk with him and he would issue some sort of hall pass, basically. It just seems to me that this takes away from the seriousness of marriage at a time when marriage is already treated very lightly.
And it leaves the teaching and the institution kind of in an ad hoc situation, depending on what the pastor in that particular parish deems important. It seems divorced from the canon law and might create more problems than it solves. I want to move on. Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga, who is a close confidant of the Pope. He's the secretary of this cardinal group of 8, the Reform Council. He was at Catholic University of America this week, and he said, this economy, he was talking about the case against libertarianism in the economic sphere. And he said, this economy kills. The hungry or sick child of the poor cannot wait. Your reaction to this and kind of the very emotional denunciations of what is a free market economy?
Well, look, there are two possible ways to take that statement, this economy kills. If you take it as an accurate reflection of what globalization is, it's absurd. Because just as much as it has obviously left some people out, it's also raised up people in China, in India, in the so-called Asian tigers, Latin America, and elsewhere. So the globalization of the economy, and insofar as the economy becomes more productive, you have places like India that had food shortages that now are net food exporters. This economy has also done a tremendous saving action in many places in the world. So if we took it strictly that way, of course, it's an absurdity. However, if it is taken to mean, and I think this is a way at least in part, he may have meant it in this conference that just occurred this week at Catholic University here in Washington on libertarianism. Why is not clear to me, because I don't think libertarianism is like a tidal wave hitting the world. But if it's taken to mean that, yes, there are still people left out and that we can't just practice laissez-faire, which the Church, of course, doesn't accept, there's a difference between having a market that really tries to bring everyone in and to distribute wealth well by encouraging people to work, etc. There's a difference between that and hoping against all historical evidence that Marxist type, socialist type, command economies are somehow going to deliver better than markets do. They don't. And we have ample historical evidence of this.
Father Murray, I want to move on and talk about something the Pope addressed this week. He told families, look, the devil is after you and trying to destroy the family. And he went on and he said, you know, rather than having more cats and dogs, why don't you think about having more children? Talk about this for a moment. I mean, it was covered a little bit, but not as extensively as some of his other statements have been.
Yes, this is an echo of when the Pope a few months ago praised Pope Paul VI in Humanae Vitae and called it a prophetic document. The contraceptive revolution has undermined family life in the Western world in a tremendous reality that's in front of us. We very rarely see large families now in our traditionally Catholic countries. Many people opt for either not having children, postponing it, and then the later you wait in your marriage to have children, then the more an economic burden it seems, because you have a lifestyle you've developed. The Pope, this is where, you know, the Pope's a radical. This is a radical idea in our current culture. Start having kids as soon as you get married. If God gives you a number of children, thank Him, don't dread it. And, you know, work hard to support your kids. But certainly, let's not look on children simply as an economic burden and as a restraint on our liberty. That's a very materialistic, secular perspective, which I think is predominant in the West.
Robert Royal, I want to move on and talk about a major reform, a shakeup in this Vatican financial panel that oversees the financial actions and doings of the Holy See. The Pope has appointed an international group of people to kind of replace what was a predominantly Italian panel. Your thoughts on this and what this tells us?
Well, I think it tells us there's real reform going to go on in certain certain areas of the Vatican. Now, it's important to understand that this is Italy, and even more that it's the Church, because some people get upset when they hear that there have been long-standing contracts with certain families that perform certain functions. Sure, in a strictly meritocratic capitalist order, you wouldn't have this, but it's kind of a family, and in some ways that works in the Vatican across a wide variety of offices. However, when you're dealing with a large international financial institution like the Vatican Bank, the IOR as it's called, you can't anymore operate on these deals, these private deals and these private connections. And in addition, there have been a number of scandals going back over decades. So to me, to clean house, to get everybody out, to just start from scratch with a new group of people, I don't think it's bad, and I think it reflects, as many people have said, the influence of Cardinal George Pell from Australia, a bit of the sort of Anglo-Saxon practicality entering into an agency of the Vatican that hasn't had it.
Yeah, having Cardinal Pell there is a major sign, and I thought was the first sign that real change was coming. He's certainly no slouch. Father Murray, I want to move on to the story that has dominated the headlines this week, the exchange of these Taliban prisoners held at Guantanamo Bay, 5 of them, for this Army private who basically defected to the Afghanis, or sergeant rather, who defected to the Afghanis. Your thoughts on this? Is it moral to create this sort of exchange, or have we somehow undercut those who gave their lives both looking for this man and rounding up these 5 leaders of the Taliban?
Yes, Raymond. Well, you may know that I was a Navy Reserve chaplain for 11 years, so I had a great appreciation for the men and women of the Navy, Marine Corps. And this is very troubling from the point of view of what actually went on. Let's remember first, the people in Guantanamo Bay were not prisoners of war. They were illegal enemy combatants. In other words, they were criminals who were trying to kill American soldiers. They should not be treated like prisoners of war, and at the end of a war you swap them. That's normal. So they're very dangerous men. They're criminals. Now, the man who was released, the sergeant, is alleged to have been a deserter. So you wonder, is this how the United States government is going to treat questions of desertion and illegal enemy combatants who try to kill soldiers? We're going to make deals. This is, having served in the military, I know we ask a lot from them. To put a burden of putting enemies back in the field and deserters, if that's what this really is a case of, being treated in this way, a lot of problems here.
Yeah. Robert Royal, the White House says we are not going to leave any of our men behind in the war field. And therefore, whatever the situation, we had to get this guy back. The Wall Street Journal just reported 29% of the people we've released, these detainees at Guantanamo, returned to violence and to the battlefield. Your thoughts?
Well, look, all that, I agree with everything Father just said, but we're in Washington right now, and I've got to say, one of the things that sticks most in my craw, and by the way, liberals and conservatives alike have pointed this out. It would have been one thing to get him out of the hands of whether this was the Taliban or just some, you know, some offshoot. To get him out of those hands, maybe with not as large a prisoner exchange. But I think what was worse, I mean, that's a troubling circumstance, but you do want your guy back. What's worse was to have made a spectacle of it. So his parents come to Washington. Susan Rice, our ambassador to the UN, goes on TV and says that he served with honor and distinction. Well, I've talked with a lot of military people about this, and they knew long before this that this guy was a deserter. So if you ask me, and maybe I've lived in Washington for too long, this is a diversion from another scandal, which is namely that our VA hospitals have not been performing to serve our wounded veterans. And now we've got another scandal or another controversy, and so the news cycle moves on, and maybe the VA passes back into the mists of history.
I should say, Time magazine did an interview with a Taliban leader who's been a long-standing contact and source of theirs. He says, when asked if the Taliban would be inspired by the exchange to kidnap others, he laughed and he said, definitely. It's better to kidnap one person like Bergdahl than kidnapping hundreds of useless people. It has encouraged our people. Now everybody will work hard to capture such an important bird. Both of you react.
Well, one other point I should have mentioned earlier. I think that President Obama is going to be emptying Guantanamo in part by exchanges of this kind or other machinations of this sort. It's clear that he wants to end that prison down there. Why have 5 basically generals of the Taliban traded for one private who became a sergeant while he was in captivity?
Right.
It seems absurd. It's a disproportion.
Father Murray, your reaction to this, even Dianne Feinstein was up in arms that Congress was not consulted on this and the way in which this handoff was done.
You know, the question here is, do we as a country who send our military into the field act in an honorable way in guiding the course of a conflict, and then when we have problems with prisoners and all, do we deal with it honorably, or do we turn it into a political spectacle? The fact that 29% of former Guantanamo Bay detainees are now back in the battlefield means we should stop all releases from Guantanamo. This is absurd. We don't send our men out to be killed twice by the same person.
Before we go, I'm almost out of time. I have to talk about this, what the Vatican is calling an intense prayer session between the president of the Palestinian territories and the president of Israel, Shimon Peres. Your thoughts on this? Pope is bringing them together on the Feast of Pentecost at the Vatican this Sunday. What will come of this? I'll give both of you a shot. Robert Royal.
Well, there's an initial problem in that Shimon Peres is not a religious man. He does not believe in God, so
and his term's almost over.
We don't know who he's going to pray to. Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian territories, is himself a non-believing Muslim. So we have 2 men who are not religious who are coming to pray with the Pope. Nonetheless, I have to say, in spite of all the potential difficulties here, it's good that the Catholic Church is there in the midst of talking about these things. I think that there were many unfortunate overtones during the Pope's visit, but he has a way of injecting the Church into the midst of these conflicts, and that might be good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Father Jerry, in Syria, it certainly bore fruit when the Pope had that unexpected and impromptu prayer service in the St. Peter's Square. He averted American action. So there is some precedent here.
Yes, and I have to say, this reminds the world that the mission of the Catholic Church is supernatural. I mean, we want people to pray. The solutions to these problems in the political sphere will depend on whether people submit to God's law, and in particular to the idea, love your enemy, and try to make an accord so that you can live at peace. I'm very happy if these men don't pray themselves. Hopefully the people in Palestine, in the Palestinian territory, rather, and in Israel will pray. And we need to have a solution that respects God's law. If we don't, we're just going to have more violence.
And it appears, I mean, the Pope, in some of the press conferences before this, he suggested that it's not only the presidents, but a Muslim representative as well as a rabbi joining him. So perhaps there's going to be an interior and an exterior prayer service. We will see. You can read both Robert Royal and Father Murray's columns by visiting thecatholicthing.org. Father Jerry, Robert, thank you so much for being here. We'll be in touch with you soon. Next month, I hope. Are you hungry? You might be after this segment. Chef, author, and priest Father Leo PATALINGHUG is up next to give us his recipe for strengthening families, and he's got a special new initiative we want to tell you about the world over. Continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. He is an internationally recognized speaker, author, radio personality, and TV host of Savoring Our Faith on EWTN. Concerned about the loss of family meals, he founded the Grace Before Meals Apostolate. Here to talk about the importance of food, faith, and family meals, as well as a new initiative for gluten-intolerant folks in the parish. Please welcome Father Leo PATALINGHUG.
Thank you.
Great to have you back on the show. Now, I want to walk things back a bit. Tell me where this whole obsession, fixation, ministry in the food domain came from.
Well, I'm human, so I need to eat.
You eat?
And I like to eat. And really, it probably began with my family, a Filipino background. We're just very open to hospitality. And really, when I went to Rome and I lived far from my family, I realized that I became brothers with strangers because of the meal. Cardinal Dolan, the rector at the time, Monsignor Dolan, encouraged a regular meal with all of the students, and I developed a theology of food, understanding that food has great power to turn strangers into brothers.
Your mother gave you a little bit of advice at one point about your eating.
Absolutely.
That kind of changed the way you looked at food.
Well, absolutely. She basically taught all of the children that if you don't know how to eat, you're not going to survive. But if you can feed other people, you are going to win them over in a way. And I know that that's exactly what Jesus did. I mean, if you were to look at all of the scriptures and to understand how he really brought about conversion, it all began around a dinner conversation.
Now, the North American College, you mentioned it a moment ago,
Correct.
in Rome. This was kind of critical. You sort of stepped up your culinary game while in Rome. Tell us what happened there.
Well, while in Italy, I became friends with a lot of chefs. We exchanged recipes. I also studied some culinary arts at the Cordon Bleu in Perugia because I just started to fall in love with food. And then when I got ordained, I just put it all in God's hands, and he's turned it into an international apostolate.
This was long before you were warring with Bobby Flay, trying to...
Pretty much, exactly.
On the Food Network. Okay. Let's talk about the Grace Before Meals books, where this came from.
Yeah.
Did you see something in the parish that made you realize I need to get people to refocus on the importance of their faith and family meals?
You got it. At one point, people invited priests over for dinners. They still do that now, and it's usually code word for, I want to talk with you about something. And so it gave me an opportunity just to be with families. And in that regular experience of family life, you could interact with them in a more personal way. And then they really began to see me not just as a spiritual father in a sense, but part of their family.
Tell me, you found this apostolate, and there is real data to show the great advantages for having the family meal. Now, I was looking at something the other day. 60 years ago, the family meal lasted 90 minutes. Today, it's less than 12.
Yeah.
What are the ramifications of that?
We bought into the fast food mentality. And that fast food mentality basically says I don't have enough time for my family, and time is money. And if we don't invest this time, our families are going to break up. The CASA research, the Center of Addictions for Substance Abuse, they basically give common sense to what we've always known as a Catholic Church. You've got to take time for your family. If not, you're going to increase addiction rates for suicide, drug and alcohol abuse, and it's known that if you actually have a regular meal with your family, you improve your teenagers' SAT scores. So
really?
Eat
Eat,
your
everybody
family.
eat up. And you also are an advocate of having the kids join the parents in the preparation for the meal.
Yeah, this might sound very basic, but if you give your children a fish they eat for the day, if you teach them how, then they survive for the lifetime. And these are all very commonsensical things, but unfortunately in the fast-paced world, common sense isn't so common.
Tell me about this new initiative you've launched, something called GIFT.
Yes.
Tell us what that stands for.
Well, I'm starting to realize that the devil wants nothing more to keep people away from communion. And one way that happens is by giving people fear with the gluten intolerance. Now, I had to take this seriously as a parish priest and worked in a parish for many years, seeing an increased number of people with intolerance.
Why? Why are they all intolerant all of a sudden? We never had this when I was a kid.
Isn't that amazing? Well, part of it has to do with a lot of the GMOs and just altered foods that we have, and it's starting to bite us back. And so what we decided was to create simply a vessel that hooks onto existing ciboria, and all you do is just keep the host separate. And with this vessel, and it's called Gluten Intolerant Faithful Thanksgiving, we give all parishioners with this condition related to gluten intolerances, even celiac disease, an opportunity to receive communion faithfully and without fear.
So it's kind of a little adjunct, it's an attachment that hangs on the end of the ciborium.
Either on the end, on the inside or in the outside, and basically on any type of vessel, so people don't have to get a whole new set.
And this was your idea?
This was my idea because this has to do with a lot of the culinary reality of plating. How do we present the meal to them? And I just saw, especially in my apostolic travels, it's an uncomfortable thing, and the most holy part of communion is just awkward now. And we're just trying to keep it sacred and simple.
Some priests that I was exchanging emails about this earlier in the week said, well, why not just let the people who are glucose intolerant take the precious blood?
Well, people do that.
Gluten intolerance.
Yeah, no, people do that. However, some parishes don't offer the precious blood. And this is going to sound a little, awkward, but some people don't want to receive just because it shares with other people. This just gives them a little bit more of a sacred approach to receiving Holy Communion.
Tell me what's next for you. What are you working on?
Well, there's actually a couple things. People have invited me to do more talks and presentations. I do a lot of clergy convocations, but there's also something in the works for even a traveling show with Savoring Our Faith in EWTN.
Oh, well, good. We'll look forward to that. Father Leo,
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Blessing.
You can find out more about the gift vessel as well as Father Leo's Grace Before Meals by visiting his website, gracebeforemeals.com, and of course his books and series are available from the EWTN Religious Catalog. When we return, an encore of my interview with the producers of the hit film Son of God. Mark Burnett and actress Roma Downey are up next to tell us about their labor of love released this week on DVD and Blu-ray. When the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel.
The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us.
Lady, I believe your son is the promised king of his people. What is his name?
Jesus. His name is Jesus.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The Bible was one of the most watched miniseries of the last year. Then the film Son of God excerpt from that series, and it was a hit at the box office. Now, Son of God is out this week on DVD and Blu-ray. To explain their vision for the film and the personal faith that propelled this project, here's an encore of my interview with producers Mark Burnett and Roma Downey from their Southern California home. Take a look. Well, it appears the tribe has spoken. This Bible miniseries has been a phenomenon, not only here in the United States, really around the globe. Tell us, first of all, did you expect anything like this when you began this project, Mark?
Oh, you know, we had hoped and prayed that our work on the sacred text of the Bible would be loved, and it came true. You know, many people who are, you know, in the secular world had said, why would you guys do this when people can get plenty of Bible by going to church on a Sunday? Mm-hmm. They won't watch it on primetime TV. And we said, we think you're wrong. We think Christ and the Bible are the very core of most people in our nation. And of course, 100 million people watch the Bible series.
When you first heard this idea, were you sold that this could become the phenomena that it has become? I mean, you know the resistance, no doubt, in this community and in parts of Hollywood. I mean, there have been the passions and occasional other projects, but this is not something that would be warmly embraced at first blush, I imagine.
I'm concerned about reaching audiences. I feel if you make something great and it's meaningful in any sort of way, you know, this is like the most important story. So I felt there was an audience. You know, I just felt more of a sense of fear and responsibility because this is not just a story. It's a sacred text. It's the sacred text that changed the world. You have to know, millions have died for it and billions live by it. That's a big responsibility. But fortunately, we did a good job.
And it was a responsibility that we took very seriously. You know, we worked hand in hand with scholars and theologians and faith leaders to make sure that what we told was accurate and that it emerged onto the screen always true to the spirit of the book and the text.
You were willing to make changes, I know, to the scenes and text, and you did that throughout the process, really.
The people today, they called you king. They think you are a messiah.
But you seem to ignore them. Aren't you going to be our king?
Who do you think I am?
You are the Son of God.
You can't have known this by what you know of me, Peter. It has been revealed to you by God. You are Peter, and on this rock, I will build my church.
You consulted everybody from Cardinal World to Rick Warren, on and on and on. I mean, it was quite a group of consultants.
We did, and we were so grateful to the faith leaders who stepped up with us and for us, and we've become and remain very close friends with Cardinal World. He stood by us, and he has been such a source of strength, and we've so appreciated our friendship with him.
So tell me, what is it, as you stand back and look at the great success this has been, what is the cultural zeitgeist that this miniseries struck, and why now bring this to the big screen?
Well, I feel that most people in our nation, if we just deal with North America at first, do believe in God and take comfort in God. And therefore, if you present God's story in a compelling, fresh, updated way, people will flock to this because people are seeking hope and love. And the reason we have made the movie, as we were shooting the television series, we realized in seeing Diogo Morgado's portrayal of Jesus and Roma's portrayal of Mary, it ignited the screen, and we said this really should be expanded and be on a big motion picture screen.
My son.
Don't be afraid. Everything is possible with God.
Move forward!
Our movie covers from the Nativity right through to the Ascension, and it gives you a complete sense of the life of the Savior, and it's just so beautiful.
So many of us have seen you for such a long period of time. You're woven into our lives. Was there any hesitation in taking on the role of Mary, Mother of God? It's not exactly a role that one takes lightly.
When the opportunity came up for me to play the Blessed Mother, I wasn't certain that when I had gone down to start filming in Morocco that I had ever planned to play a role in it. I had gone there just as a producer. But, you know, it was actually at Mark's suggestion and at Diogo Morgado's encouragement. He said, I think that you should really do this, and we prayed on it, and I stepped into it, and it was the most marvelous experience, you know, because on the one hand, Mary was the mother of the Son of God, but on the other hand, Mary was the mother of a son. And it was profoundly moving to film those scenes, particularly the scenes where she has to help him up with the cross, or to stand at the foot of the cross, to imagine, I'm a mother myself, what a mother might be feeling in those moments was profoundly moving to film that.
You see that on the screen.
And there's such an opportunity, I think, for you know, for this to be part of a new evangelization. You know, I know that we have teenagers ourselves, and there's a real opportunity here that young people learn more through film and television, through seeing a story played out on the screen. And how much easier is it to say, would you come and see a film with me, perhaps, than it is to say, do you want to talk about faith, or do you want to go to church? It's profoundly moving, and ultimately it's completely uplifting.
There is something unusual about him.
We must arrest this false prophet.
But what if he is who they say he is?
Won't somebody tell me?
Peter, come.
Answer if you can.
One of you here will betray me to my enemies.
I want someone to tell me, what is the soul of a man?
Jesus of Nazareth, you are charged with blasphemy. He has employed demons to heal. He threatened to destroy the temple. Tell us, are you the Son of God?
I am.
Son of God is available now on DVD and Blu-ray in both English and Spanish at all the usual outlets and online. Visit sonofgodmovie.com. Now, before we go, 2014 marks the 10th anniversary of the passing of Heart Song's author, poet, and peace activist, Mattie Stepanek. Mattie would have been 24 years old on June 22nd. To commemorate and celebrate his short but remarkable life, the Mattie J.T. Stepanek Guild will host a memorial mass here in Washington, D.C. I can't think of a better place for this mass of remembrance and thanksgiving for Mattie. All are invited to attend. I will have info up on my website at RaymondArroyo.com, but be sure to join us if you can on Sunday, June 22nd at 3 p.m. at the Franciscan Monastery for the Memorial Mass for Mattie J.T. Stepanek. It'll be quite a moment. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are on my website, and I'll bring you the latest news and commentary, and we'll have some fun throughout the week. I post the entire show there as well. And if you sign up for the free e-blast, I'll send you all kinds of exclusives. Go to the middle of the website page at RaymondArroyo.com to sign up for the e-blast. Join us next week. We will talk fatherhood with my guest, Fox News special report host Brett Baer, and President of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, during the Bishops' Spring Meeting in New Orleans. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. We'll see you next time. Bye now.